Just two. Hi. Is the camera scary? Huh? Hi. Pretty. Pretty.
Okay, we have Australian Shepherd, right Paige. Where's Paige sitting now? Right over there. Australian Shepherd, Captain. You want to tell us anything remarkable about Captain?
He was the runt, that's why he's so small, but he's supposed to be full grown.
Okay, how old?
2 years.
2 years old. Neutered?
Yep.
Okay. Any health issues?
No.
Okay, and when did you get Captain?
About a year and a half ago.
Oh, okay, so he was like about half a year old.
Yeah.
What was his story before you got him?
I got him from a breeder in Whitewood.
So they had it since it was born and they...
Yeah, he was the runt phenom one of them.
Oh, I see. Yeah. How big was the litter? Okay. Because here's one thing about runts. I know like in pigs, sometimes the runts come, and some of you that know this better than me because I'm a little rusty on that. Sometimes runts come from one end of the uterus or the other. And you know, like a dog's uterus looks very much like a pig uterus because there's like two long elongated horns, and then the ovaries are over here. And I cannot remember if the pore circulation is on the ovarian end or over by the cervix. I cannot remember. Anybody have read that recently? I can't remember. Anyway, so it might be something about blood supply, or it could be genetic, or all of the above, right? Because you know that genetic formula, phenotype equals genotype plus environment. He's got a set of genes, but it could be something about the environment, the intrauterine environment that he was developing. Yeah.
Is it something to do with the nutrients? Because like when I was harvesting pigs, the uterus, like the further away from the end it was, like the bigger the fetus. Yeah.
Okay, which end are we talking about now?
Not the end of the uterus, like where the runs are. It's like the close.
Are they closer to the ovary?
Yeah. That's
Okay, so yeah, because I can't remember all those species differences. But let's say as you get towards the ovarian end, blood supply gets a little limiting, more than like in the middle at least, and that might be a reason for the runt. Or it could be something genetic, you don't know for sure. Because then if it was a runt of the litter, that might indicate that all the other ones were, let's say, normal. Not all the same size, right? So to be a runt, you have to have litter mates that are bigger than you. That's the definition of a runt. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so he's walking around, very nice dog. Okay, so how did yesterday go?
We went over that
Kidneys, livers, nephrons. Okay. Yeah, that reminds me, I'm still grading those assessments from last week. Was that assessment 8, I think? Yeah. They just take a long time, and I told you the results of 7, and then some people are dropping these forms off. They're in that back cabinet here where you list your points, and I think I did 2 yesterday. They were spot on. I think the one before that, there were like a couple that were just 2 points off, which means 1 question. And we can resolve that by finding the original answer sheet. You know, I've been sending, sometimes people, I just take a picture with my phone and send it to them on an email and say, here's what you got. So we'll still work on that, not a problem. Okay, any burning questions so far, or that you've come up with? Okay, so we're doing kidney and liver this week, and you know what? We could spend a month on that stuff, because it's just mad, it's amazing. We're just going to spend a week. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so my question is, so when you studied this, you said that peristalsis is like the force that's moving within the kidney.
Okay, so
for, like,
peristalsis.
filtration, yes.
Okay, no. So peristalsis, and this brings up a great point. If you know sometimes the root of a word, you can either use it as a right answer in assessment or a wrong answer. Because I can't remember what the question was, but somebody picked out a wrong answer. It was something about, I think, nerves, the covering around a nerve, and somebody picked out pericardium. And pericardium literally means around the heart. But that's the answer they picked for the nerve. I think it was myelin sheath or something like that was the right answer. So it's like peristalsis right there is something is around, and stalsis a lot of times is movement. So peristalsis is a movement in a tube that tends to repel its contents in one direction. So, but go ahead and ask that.
Okay, so my question is, on one of the quizzes, the question is, indicate the main force responsible for renal blood filtration. And that was,
Okay, the major, so in case somebody is hearing, the major force for blood filtration in the kidney.
yeah, and that answer was hydrostatic pressure.
Hydrostatic
So
pressure.
what's the difference
Okay,
there?
gotcha. Hydrostatic pressure is like some pump working. Like if you drove a car today, the coolant was being circulated through the motor by hydrostatic pressure. There's a water pump and it's spinning and it's forcing water through the radiator and so forth. Usually, and then you can have hydrostatic pressure because of gravity. Like if you had a column of water, water would tend to want to like force out the bottom. Just like if you drive by a water tower, they pump the water up, but then it's coming out by gravity. It distributes itself through all the pipes, all the vessels. So that's hydrostatic pressure, and that's the main filtration force at the glomerulus. And we can draw this sometime too. I was going to go through some of the reading too. Peristalsis is not related to that at all. Peristalsis is where the intestines contract and relax and tend to propel the contents toward the anal opening, right? Isn't that kind of very well coordinated rather than have it pump back up towards the stomach? So, so now I'm going to connect peristalsis with kidney function. Okay, peristalsis has nothing to do with the kidney itself. If you took out a kidney and put it on the table, or I could bring a horse kidney that I dissected out from a horse, there's nothing about peristalsis going on in the kidney itself. But the kidney, the urine flows from the kidney to the bladder in a tube called the ureter, and it flows in the ureter by peristalsis, not by hydrostatic pressure. Okay, so when urine goes to the bladder from the kidney, the ureters have smooth muscle in their walls, and it's contracting such that it's forcing the urine to the bladder. So peristalsis is one thing, hydrostatic pressure is another. It's usually, hydrostatic pressure is good to think of a pump. The heart is a pump, but it could be by gravity too. So water pressure, think of that, hydrostatic pressure, water pressure. Okay, good questions. I mean, that's why we meet face to face here to get that out. There's no textbook that just explained it like I did, that compared those two. So, other questions? Okay. Then the next thing I was going to do is I was going to go to some of the reading, because when I am grading this assessment 8, I'm thinking, gee, that was in the reading, that was in the reading, that person missed that because it was in the reading. And I wanted to go through some of that and maybe point out some high points from the reading. I think the videos are pretty straightforward. So let me do that. Because I think the reading is probably the thing that's done the least by students. Okay, so here we got nephrology and Pathology, that literally means study of the kidneys, study of the kidneys, study of the liver. And then we're going to go to click 1. And this is about the urinary system, okay, and they've got some objective structure. Homeostasis, of course, the kidneys are going to try to help maintain a steady state. And we're going to talk about the filtration here, you know, processes that control internal conditions maintained. Okay, so what, you know, there's a lot of water. We always say about 65% of the body weight is water weight. 65%. So if you have a 100-pound dog, there's 65 pounds of water total. Okay? And then they come up with some things. An animal body consists of up to 80% water. Well, that would be a very young animal, or maybe even a fetus or an embryo. An embryo is like 95% water. So, you know, some of these figures they throw around, they don't say what animal, but nothing most living animals are, the mammals, the domestic animals that we deal with are never 80% water. Okay? Health, whatever. And then you know what it's called when you're low of water. What's that called? When an animal is lacking water for a while. They're dehydrated. And what does that do to packed cell volume? You can wrap it all up. A dehydrated animal would have what kind of packed cell volume? Increase, higher than normal. And that's kind of like weird. You know, you're lacking something and something goes up. So, you know, we're doing that for a little while. Okay, intracellular fluid, there's extracellular fluid, great little prefixes there. Where it is found in the spaces. Tissue fluid, what's another name for tissue fluid? Interstitial fluid. Yeah. See how we can wrap all that up? Boy, here, let's see. Very cautious. Okay. Okay, stop, 2. I'm gonna, remember 65% of the water. Yeah, 65% of the body weight is water. This one's saying 2/3 of the water in the body is inside cells. So they're saying most of the water in the body is intracellular. Okay, so then there's all this kind of stuff. We'll talk about, desert animals. We don't have any desert animals in our domestic animals, right? But that brings up the point. My mind wants to say, what are the 3 sources of water for an animal? Animals can get water 3 ways.
In their feed, drinking water, and then metabolic water.
Right. In their feed, whatever they eat, and then the free drinking water, and then there are some metabolic processes that make water. Okay? And so it's kind of neat. You might say, oh, my dog isn't drinking a lot of water. Well, if you feed it canned dog food, if you feed your dog canned dog food, they drink less water than a dog on kibble. Why is that? The canned dog food is 80% water. Read that label sometime. 80% water. So that big can, 80% of it's water. So if you're getting that much water, you drink less free water. Okay? 3 sources of water. Well, then here's a lateral view of the urinary system. Of course, we have kidneys, and they're showing 1, but there's obviously 2. And if you ever become a surgeon, be aware, some animals and people are born with more than 2 kidneys. They're called supernumerary kidneys. Let's see if we can freely spell that. Super, S-U-P-E-R, which is a prefix meaning above. Numerary, N-U-M-E-R-A-R-Y. Supernumerary. Does that look right? Supernumerary kidneys. So I can probably show you a picture real quick of somebody that's got like 3 kidneys. That's pretty common. The kidneys are high in the lumbar region. Remember last week we did the vertebral column? Don't forget about that. Cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, coccygeal. So they're up there in the high lumbar region. tucked against the backbone. And when I was a graduate student in Nebraska, I can't remember if I told you this story, I think I told you in the class. One of the graduate students loved rodeo and he loved bronc riding, Russell. He was always gone every weekend. And he had these wild stories on Monday morning. Anyway, finally he had to quit riding broncs. The doctor said his kidneys were shaking loose. All that jarring. But he loved the rodeo, so he couldn't leave, and so he became a rodeo clown. You see those guys out there with the bull, distracting the bull? That's what Russell ended up doing. Anyway, then we talked about the ureters. There's 2 ureters. From every kidney, there's a ureter going to the bladder. And it attaches not this way at all. That drawing is so false. The ureters never attach to the bladder there. They actually attach underneath, right near the neck of the bladder. And I can maybe find a picture today or tomorrow. So that's really false there. And then we know the urine travels to the bladder by peristalsis, coordinated muscle movement. And then we have a bladder that's made of transitional epithelium. Transitional, you guys know how to spell that. Transitional epithelium is interesting because it basically can stretch, it moves. So when the bladder fills up with urine, it tends to get larger, as we all can attest to that. And then when the urine is voided, then the bladder stretches back to kind of a resting state. Urination is a reflex. Look at how I'm building that in. Remember we had reflexes in the neural, and last week we talked about the knee-jerk reflex. So urination is a coordinated reflex. It's neural. There's stretch receptors in the bladder that once they get large enough, then there's this urge to empty the bladder, and when you're a young animal or an infant, you really don't have any control over that reflex, so that's why diapers get wet. But when you get older, you can overcome that reflex. And the reflex is given a very scientific name, and it starts with M. Spell it out. Anybody know what the urination reflex is really called? Where?
Is it micturition?
Yeah, micturition. Now, where's that coming from? I know it's coming from your brain, but where did you learn that?
My high school anatomy.
Good, look at those memories. Yeah, micturition reflex. Let's see, can you spell it for us? I know it's M-I-C.
Is it M-I-C-T-U-R-T?
I think it's U-R-I-T-I-O-N. Micturition reflex, or micturition, the act of voiding urine. Very good. Look at how those memories are good. Okay. And then, this is like almost too simplistic drawing, because then they didn't label this part, which is the urethra, right? U-R-E-T-H-R-A, the urethra. That's that common exit point for urine in both males and females. So like the kidneys are the same in the male and females, the ureter, the bladder, and the urethra. Now in the female, the urethra ends up in the caudal portion of the vagina, and in the male it would be running through the penis, like the bull penis we have on the floor. So this thing has a urethra in it, but it's all dehydrated. So, and Paige, this is yours, okay? Or, yeah, whatever. Okay, so then we go to the kidneys. Our bean-shaped organs, that's a lie for cattle. You ever seen a kidney in a cow? It's like somebody cut the surface into little lobes, very lobulated. But in most cases they are kidney shaped. And another thing in the horse, one is kind of kidney shaped, but yeah, it ends up being one kidney in the horse is heart shaped. Got kind of like a structure like a horse. And by the way, horses are interesting because they tend to have mucus in their urine, and most animals don't do that at all. So horse urine tends to be cloudy, whereas most every other animal has urine that's pretty clear, got a yellow tint from it to it. So then, I want to show you how this aorta comes out, and of course that's the largest artery in the body. And that vessel that branches off the aorta would be called the renal artery. And it tends to make a right-hand turn. Notice how if blood's going to be flowing this way, by the way. This is cranial, this is caudal. When blood flows down this way, notice how that's kind of like a right angle. And you know what? That tends to decrease the number of red blood cells going to the kidney. A little bit. So the packed cell volume here would be higher than here. Slightly. And then there are, let's say 1 million nephrons. That's the functional unit of the kidney, right? Sometimes in organ you got to say, what's the functional unit? And in the kidney, it's the nephron. That's the main part that works. So then you've got this, and this isn't labeled here, but I guess over there it is. That's the renal vein coming back out. That's going to go into the vena cava. And if that's the vena cava, then you know blood is flowing that way, right? That's cranial. The blood has to go that way. So then what happens is the blood in the renal vein definitely has increased packed cell volume because some of the fluid now is going to head down the ureter. So if you take some fluid out of blood, what's left is more red blood cells, relatively speaking. So then you've got this, these two structures here, then you've got a bladder, and of course it doesn't attach like this. That drawing is not right. And then you have the sphincter, which is a great word. That means a group of muscles that tend to have like a ring-like structure. That's a sphincter. It's not the only place sphincters are. Pass that over there, will you please? So we don't forget that. I'm going to go reset my camera. Okay. And the mituration reflex releases or relaxes that sphincter, but then there's other muscles that contract to expel the urine. A sphincter is any circular formation of muscles that tend to be in a ring. And they tend to keep the whatever tube they're around closed. Okay, that's a sphincter. So that's not a bad drawing, could have been labeled better. There's the urethra if you didn't get the spelling there. Okay, then we go to a mid-sagittal section of the kidney. MID-SAGITTAL, mid-sagittal. That means you stood the kidney at the table and cut it right down the middle and came up with a left half and a right half. Not a top portion and a bottom portion, but two halves like an orange. Mid-sagittal, also called medial, M-E-D-I-A-L, medial section. So then we start honing in on more fine structure. And then of course, most organs can be divided into the cortex. So you have a kidney cortex, you have an adrenal cortex, we talked about that. And then medulla, there it is right there. The medulla tends to be the center part. Always have a capsule around it, the kidney. And then there are these groups of structures, or you can call them pyramids, where common urine flows into these tubes. But the center part tends to be called the pelvis, the renal pelvis. This whole thing is the renal pelvis. So all the urine gets dumped into the renal pelvis, and then that leads into the ureter, which is right here, okay? And then you have a renal vein, renal artery that splits off. It has to split off 1 million times. This one thing, this one artery has to split off 1 million times. If there's 1 million nephrons, there's got to be 1 million branches, because each nephron has one arteriole supplying it. I'll show you that. So not bad, a dissected kidney. I mean, yeah, it's okay. Okay, then we get into more detail, and I'm going to skip down here to the nephron. And I'm probably going to draw it on the document cam, which I'll turn on. Because I want to draw one nephron and then talk about 3 key words, what the nephron does. And we already said one, filtration. You know, it filtrates blood. So let me do that. This is not bad. See, there's the branch of the renal artery. So if there's 1 million nephrons, here's one branch, there's going to be 1 million branches. Can you imagine one tube coming in and splitting off 1 million times? We'll talk about Bowman's capsule. Proximal means closer to, and distal means further away. So like this part of the tube is closer to this section than this section. So, and it's actually closer by the way the urine flows. So the proximal convoluted tubule, convoluted means, you know, wiggly. And then, so this tends to be cortex and medulla is down here. And then what this doesn't show is there's another nephron here that dumps into the collecting duct, and there's all these nephrons. So let me draw that and in a bigger picture and name some of these other processes. So, there we go. Let me see. That's about it. So now, I'm going to see if I'm on the screen. I am. Okay. And so I'm drawing impaired, and this dumps into a collecting duct. Okay, so there's one nephron. There's 1 million of these. Well, I've just shown you the tube that conveys urine. Right now, I have drawn no blood supply. But the thing about a nephron is, it's completely surrounded by blood vessels. But I want to show you the one that comes in. I'll have this one come up like this. So this is a branch of the renal artery, just like that picture. And then when it enters this, I guess, you know, it looks like a snake eating something, doesn't it? It becomes a capillary, but it's called a knot of capillaries, K-N-O-T. And it's like it's a lot of tube, and it's a knot. So, you know, bear with me. You can look at better drawings, but I'm just going to draw them this way, okay? It's hard to draw. And then there's a blood supply out. Now, the weird thing about the kidney is that that's an arteriole going in. Okay, let's see. That one might be. Sorry. So this is an arteriole, and this is an arteriole. That's weird, right? Usually, when you leave a capillary bed, what would this vessel be called? A venule. But it's not. It's called an arteriole. The afferent arteriole and the efferent arteriole, and it actually leads to another capillary bed. And maybe what I'll do, I'll show this going here and then kind of going like this. And this is also a capillary. And this is a capillary bed. So I have 2 capillary beds in series. What's that called? Portal system. You should have a page that says portal system. There's 3 portal systems in the body. One was the hypothalamus pituitary, then here's another one, capillary bed, capillary bed. Did you guys see what I did about the afferent arteriole versus the efferent arteriole? What did I do in my drawing? Compare the afferent arteriole to the efferent arteriole. What did I do?
You made the efferent like lesser in diameter?
Yeah, a smaller diameter. And what does that do then to a capillary that's leaking? What does that do to water pressure?
Increases it.
Increases it. If you have a big pipe coming in and then someplace where it's leaking and then a smaller pipe going out, that's going to force more fluid into Bowman's space. And that's true what it is. I purposely drew it like that. So that helps hydrostatic pressure. That builds up hydrostatic pressure, and we're going to get urine, or fluid, I should say, flowing into this Bowman's capsule. Now, what I've just drawn, those green arrows, it's hard to see that it's green. when that fluid gets to that spot right here, where I've got little dots, that's called crude urine. The kidney makes a lot of crude urine that will never make it to the bladder. In fact, some people estimate if all that stuff that's in Bowman's capsule went to the bladder, we would all die in a couple hours. All the fluid in our body would be gone. So about 99% of that fluid that's in Bowman's capsule has to come back to the body, come back into the body. So I'm going to show that. But that process that I just did is filtration. When blood fluid is squeezed through little pores in the capillary and make it into Bowman's capsule. Okay, that's filtration. So that's one of the three words that I want to make sure you understand. That's filtration. There's no going back. It's always, that's the only way it goes. But now, crude urine is going to flow this way. We'll make sure you know the flow rate. So I'm going to say 100 drops over here. Only one make it over here. So 99 drops of urine, crude urine, has to come back into the blood supply. And it happens right here. What does that arrow show? That arrow shows water moving from the descending loop of Henle back into the blood vessel, and that's by osmosis. Remember, osmosis is the diffusion of water? So by the time the crude urine gets way over to number 1, that's going to be refined urine. But 99% of it got back into the blood, and that's called reabsorption. That process, when anything comes from the lumen of the nephron back into the blood, that's reabsorption. And it happens up here because I didn't draw it, but think of this whole snake-like structure surrounded by capillary. Think of it all. So here's a famous thing too. Let's say there's another capillary right there. I just want to make sure that's a capillary. Lo and behold, glucose is filtered by the kidney, but it's reabsorbed in this part of the nephron, so then urine shouldn't have much glucose. Unless you're diabetic, then it spills over and can't handle all the glucose. But there should be very little glucose over here. You shouldn't lose glucose. That's your energy source. So it's called reabsorption of glucose. Notice how it's not called absorption of glucose? Because where does absorption of glucose occur? In the gut. The intestines absorb glucose. The kidneys do not absorb glucose. The kidneys have reabsorption of glucose. See how? But some textbooks, if you read, and maybe some of our reading, who knows, might call it absorption of glucose. But that's not right because, number one, glucose gets absorbed in the intestines. So then this way, it was going to leave the body, but now it's reabsorbed. So we have filtration here, we have reabsorption around the whole thing. When water comes back, it's usually by osmosis. But then, I'm going to show you how something in this capillary can get into urine. So I'm going to draw an arrow from this capillary into the lumen of the nephron. Wow. This is complicated. The kidney does this with certain ingredients, and it does it sometimes with antibiotics. Isn't that neat? You can have antibiotics in your blood, and you can treat a kidney infection because you know that antibiotic gets put from the blood into the lumen of the nephron. That's a great way to fight a kidney infection. That process is called secretion. So, this is secretion. Okay. This is called reabsorption. And and this, I'll make sure I'm in there, filtration. There we go. Glucose is reabsorbed, fluid is filtered, and some ingredients are secreted. So what a process going on, and there's a million of this per kidney. That's the functional unit, and you know, there's some of the anatomy is in the reading here. That's the glomerulus, Bowman's capsule, Bowman's space, proximal convoluted tubule, distal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, and the osmotic pressure down here gets quite high, so there's a lot of water being drawn back into the blood. Now it doesn't go to the blood first though, right? Because to get to that blood vessel, you have to go through interstitial space, right? So it's going to flow that way, but sooner or later it'll get picked up by the capillaries. Questions? I think that's a great spot just to end it. Tomorrow we'll do a little more kidney, then we got to talk about liver. Make sure you know the liver does not make urine. I've had people tell me that. They didn't have a good high school biology or something. Okay, so make sure you have that urination reflex sometime today, okay? That's an order. Yeah,